Are you tired of always using the good old bingo, tic-tac-toe and hangman as the only games to make your lessons more exciting? Are you looking for new ways to use games and new games to use? I'm Rubens Heredia, one of your Pavilion ELT vloggers, and in our 2023 video series we're looking at different resources we can use to make lessons more effective, engaging and fun. In this video, I'll share with you 5 ways in which you can use games in your lessons, from old-time classics to artificial intelligence and even known games. Want to know how? So come with me. Teachers have been using games to make language learning more fun and engaging for ages. And games can be an effective way to teach English, as they help students learn and practice new vocabulary, grammar and pronunciation in a relaxed and enjoyable environment. Games can also help promote teamwork, problem-solving and critical thinking skills. But in a world that's increasingly gamified with apps, social media, and even schools promising fun at all costs, it can end up being quite tricky to use games to actually generate the engagement we want. So let's cut to the chase. Tip number 1, use games to create memorable moments. We usually choose to use games because we want to create moments in a lesson when engagement and excitement levels are at their highest. By introducing a game that leads to that state, you can reinforce learning and create a memorable experience for your students. When students are having fun, they're more likely to remember the new vocabulary and structures and maybe use them in future communication. I read a really interesting article in the latest edition of Modern English Teachers that I found super interesting. It was written by Nick Michelodakis and it's called A Moment Can Be Worth 1,000 Minutes, where he discusses ways in which we can create what Chip and Dean Heath describe as moments of elevation, moments that make us feel engaged, joyful, amazed and motivated. According to Nick, this is the moral for us teachers. Creating peak moments in lessons means that our students are more likely to remember our lessons favorably, which means that they are going to be more motivated and they are going to learn more. Mind you, just be careful not to overuse the term game in a deceiving manner. Saying to students that they will play a game and then assigning a gap-fill exercise from the course book and telling them that the winner is whoever finishes first is not really fair to your students, is it? It's not really a game. But stick around and we'll talk a little bit more about non-game activities in tip number 4. Tip number 2, use familiar games. Using familiar games in language learning has several benefits. First, students are more likely to get engaged and motivated to participate in an activity that they already know and enjoy. This can reduce anxiety and create a comfortable learning environment. And also, familiar games provide a context for practicing language in a meaningful and communicative way. Here are everyday games that are helpful for language learners, even at lower levels. Taboo, Scrabble, Pictionary, Charades, Simon Says, 20 Questions, I Spy, a classic of road trips where one player selects an object within view and gives a clue starting with I spy something for others to guess what it is. More complex trivia games or games inspired by game shows can also be an engaging way to captivate higher-level students and even add some elements of clue to your lessons. According to Phil Wade, adaptations of famous TV games often work particularly well as students already know the format and enjoy watching them in their free time. Here are some games that you may like and which can be done in teams competing for points. The Weakest Link, Deal or No Deal, The Price is Right, Mr. and Mrs. Some of these popular game shows, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, even have free online versions. A quick online search can help you find some games students might be familiar with. Tip number 3, use single-player games. Games are quite easy and straightforward to implement in larger classrooms, but your private students shouldn't be left out of the fun. Using one-person games provides a way for students to practice and reinforce language skills independently, without the need for a partner or a group. Some examples of one-person games that can help students learn English are Wordle, a game where players try to guess the hidden word by guessing the letters one at a time, and the classic crossword puzzles. If you have seen my latest video, you remember I talked about using artificial intelligence in lessons. And this is one of the things it can do for your students, to stand in as a player whenever the students feel like practicing. I asked ChatGPT, the most popular chatbot so far, to give me suggestions of games we could play together. Here's what it said. Sure, Here are a few ideas for games we could play together. Word association game. I'll say a word and you have to say the first word that comes to your mind. Then I'll say a word based on your response and so on. We can keep going back and forth until one of us can think of a word. Trivia game. I can ask you a series of questions on a topic of your choice and you can try to answer them. Or you can ask me questions and I'll try to answer them to the best of my knowledge. Guessing game. I'll think of a word, object or person and you have to guess what it is by asking me yes or no questions. We can keep going until you guess correctly. 20 questions. Similar to the guessing game, I'll think of a word, object or person and you have to guess what it is by asking up to 20 yes or no questions. Let me know which game you would like to play or if you have any other ideas. Yep, times are a-changing. Tip number 4, use principles of game psychology. Okay, so far we've talked about actual games, right? However, if we understand why games are so addictive and motivating, we can try to bear these qualities in mind when creating other activities that are not exactly what springs to mind when we think of the word game. In another very recent and very interesting article from Modern English Teacher, Vita Kogan reflects on what makes games motivating and how these attributes can be transferred into English lesson activities, giving students a sense of productivity, purpose, and progress. You want to create a task that is slightly beyond your students' current proficiency level and exciting enough for the students to be willing to manage the challenge. Creating challenging, engaging tasks for students where language is used as a tool rather than an end goal is one way to ensure flow. I feel the communicative tasks that involve a tangible outcome are perfect for that. For example, you can group students and tell them that they have 20 minutes to plan a weekend trip to a city nearby, including finding tickets, choosing a place to stay, 2 places to eat and 2 attractions to visit. Then, students can share their plans and vote on the best one. Tip number 5, use student suggestions. Try as we may, we are always going to be a little bit behind in terms of what the latest trending game is. We're also biased by our preferences when it comes to games. So let's not forget the most important resource we have at our disposal, our students. Allowing students to make suggestions for games to be used in English lessons can be a highly beneficial practice for both teachers and students. It can help to foster a sense of ownership and participation in the learning process, leading to an increased engagement and motivation that comes from students feeling that their ideas are valued and taken into account. I'll leave you with the words of David Dodgson in a great article for English Teaching Professional in which he describes his experience with Minecraft. It is important for our students to see that they too are experts. They have interests and pursuits that they can teach other people about. Giving them control of the teaching and learning process in this way is very empowering. This sense of purpose and personal investment can create powerful learning opportunities, and that is where our roles as teachers come to the fore, to guide our learners to these moments and equip them with the language they need. I hope these tips help you revisit the way you use games in lessons and have a few new ideas on how to engage students and enhance learning. Do you have a favorite game you like to use in lessons? Have you got any suggestions on how other teachers can use the games and AI tools I mentioned in their lessons? Let us know in the comments below. You can also contact me on all social media at whatisELT. Keep learning and keep teaching.